Most experts consider a premeditated nuclear war unthinkable, but regional conflicts around the world could easily escalate into nuclear emergencies, not to mention the wildcard scenarios of a nuclear-armed North Korea or Iran.
We must never allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon or a nuclear bomb.
The danger of a nuclear-armed Iran is the president's chief worry.
We cannot let the world's leading sponsor of terror, a regime that chants death to America and threatens Israel all of the time with annihilation and constantly screams out death to Israel, to possess the deadliest weapon on earth. We will not allow that to happen.
And even after the historic handshake in Singapore between the president and Kim Jong-un last summer, North Korea has yet to give up on its nuclear ambitions.
North Korea and Iran, prospectively, are both very real challenges.
But they are far from the only nuclear threats to the United States. Eric Edelman is a former diplomat and Defense Department official.
The biggest nuclear threat remains Russia, because they're the only other country with an arsenal that does pose an existential threat to the United States, although China's arsenal is growing.
To contend with that threat, the U.S. is threatening to pull out of a Cold War-era nuclear treaty if Russia does not comply with the terms by February.
Doviai, no proviai.
Trust but verify. That's how President Ronald Reagan characterized the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, or INF, with Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev some 3 decades ago. Now, that trust is eroding. Russia has more nuclear weapons than any other country in the world, and a new report based on hacked cables warns it may now be storing nuclear arms in Crimea, making Russia the only nation other than the U.S. to store nuclear weapons in other countries. Russia's top general said in December that a U.S. withdrawal from the INF treaty would put a target on the backs of countries hosting U.S. missile systems.
Both Russia and China are investing in new nuclear weapons and new delivery platforms.
The U.S. has not built a new nuclear weapon in over 30 years. That, coupled with aging delivery platforms from the air, on land, and at sea, has created space for global powers to up the ante.
We've grown very complacent about this because since 1945 nobody has used nuclear weapons in anger, and so I think there's a tendency to think no one will ever do this.
That's not to suggest a premeditated nuclear war is on the horizon.
Nuclear war would be crazy in the abstract and even in reality. No one's going to just decide to launch it out of the blue.
Michael O'Hanlon, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute, insists that setting off a nuclear bomb would only ever be the last resort of a regional conflict spun out of control.
The stakes would be extremely high in any kind of direct confrontation between nuclear-armed countries because you don't know at what point the losing side is going to accept defeat rather than escalate to nuclear threats or nuclear use.
The tendency is to think of Iran and North Korea as the most imminent threats, and they are. But the U.S. must be prepared for Russia's nuclear force and China's growing nuclear arsenal as well. John Jessup, CBN News, The Pentagon.